Imagine a world where people actually listen to you. Wouldn't that be awesome? You're speaking, you say something, and people actually listen. How would you feel if that's what was happening in your life? So today's topic is they don't listen. And my hope is that by the end of this video, you will have acquired 3 new ways of speaking that will help you speak with people in a way that they listen better to what you're saying. So let's become more awesome on the inside. Point number 1 would be different definitions. So make sure you both have the same definition. There was a time, a long time ago, I brought a prop and I was cutting my boyfriend's hair. And he was like, I told you cut my hair over my ears. I was like, I am. Cut, cut, cut. He's like, are you cutting my hair over my ears? I'm like, yes, I am. Cut, cut, cut. And he's like, I think you're not. I think you're not doing it. So we get a mirror and everything and we look. So let's think about that for a minute. He wants me to cut his hair over his ears. So I'm going to ask you for your first impression. If you were cutting someone's hair, not that you need to be a stylist, but if you were cutting someone's hair and they said, cut my hair over my ears, where would you cut their hair? What is your first impression? Would you cut it over their ears? Or would you cut it over their ears, right? What was your first impression? So if you're watching this, let me know in the comments, even if you're watching the replay, which you can put hashtag replay, of course, and let me know if you would have cut it above or covering, because the word was over, but it has 2 definitions. So now I know some of you are probably thinking both, so you can type in both if you want to, right? But this lesson from, wow, I don't know, it's 23 and I'm triple that almost now, and not quite, but that stuck with me for all these years, that sometimes people have a different meaning. You're using the exact same word, but people aren't hearing you the way you want them to hear you because they think their definition is the right one. You think yours is the right one. Not that anybody has to be right or wrong, but we each think the other one knows what we're talking about. So if somebody's not listening to you or you're saying something and they keep doing something else, maybe you could say, wow, what is your definition of that word, phrase, concept, idea, whatever, so that you guys can get on the same page. So there's something like, I don't know, be sure that you're on the same page about whatever the concept is so that you're both speaking the same language, right? So you'll know where to go above for over or covering. So that's the first one. The second one would be appropriate word use. Now, I mean that appropriate to the brain. So the brain receives information in particular ways. So the words we say to one another, toward one another, can have an impact on how well the words are received by that other person's brain. Let me give you 2 examples. Oftentimes, other people will say things like, don't forget blank, the bread. Don't forget to pick me up. Don't forget your appointment, whatever it is. For today, I'm just going to use don't forget the bread, just as something easy. And more than likely, the person's going to forget the bread because the brain really only hears the word forget. And it does. It just shuts down and forgets. So find words or phrases that have essentially the same meanings. For example, if you say, don't forget the bread, more than likely it's going to be forgotten because it's not that the other person isn't listening to you. It's that their brain works in such a way that the message that's being received has something to do with the don't and the forget. So think about if somebody goes, don't, you're like, you want to step back. Like, don't what? Don't. And then they go, forget. And you go, oh, forget. Got it. Done. So that's me spelling it out, but the brain works in nanoseconds. So it would have like, don't, what, forget, yes. So it completely forgets and it's gone. But if we can use a different word, for example, remember to pick up the bread. The brain's participating in an active energy and it likes that. It wants to engage in an active way. So even though you may say, don't forget, in a well-meaning, I'm trying to help you remember or remind you or whatever, the brain is challenged because it goes into a shut it off mode. Not a technical term, but it goes into a shut it off mode. It just doesn't want to hear that. It doesn't respond to that, I should say. So a better word instead of don't forget is remember. There's tons of these. I'm going to do one more example. Another example, and this also is a little how the brain registers certain things. This one's going to take a little longer for me to go through. So this example is, hi, if you're here, go ahead and let me know where you're from. I'm looking over at the comments over here. So let me see who you are, where you're from. That would be really great. I can only see an eyeball with a number, so it makes it tough. Anyway, point number 2 under appropriate word use for the brain is the words I'm sorry. And this phrase is so overused by so many people that it's kind of lost its meaning. So saying I'm sorry should be used when you actually mean to apologize for something. So maybe you draw blood, you break a bone, you accidentally set somebody's house on fire, because it's not frivolous. It's not small or insignificant. It's true, genuine apology. So if somebody's not listening to you and you're saying over, I'm sorry this, I'm sorry that, I'm sorry this, it could very well be because they're hearing an energy coming from a lesser place. When we say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, too many times, and for the frivolous things like, oh, I dropped my pen, I'm sorry. And it's like, why are we sorry that we dropped our pen? Or, oh, you're almost out of a charge on your phone, I'm sorry. Why are we sorry that they are having this issue? So if we're using I'm sorry at the wrong time, the brain's not going to be picking it up because it doesn't make sense to the brain. It just doesn't make sense when we apologize. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense when we apologize at the wrong times. So take, for example, excuses. People use excuses all the time, but excuses actually are only good for the person making the excuse. And saying I'm sorry at the wrong times is actually only good for the person who's saying the I'm sorry. It makes them feel better. We'll go over that in just a few minutes. In Spanish, there's 2 ways to say I'm sorry. In English, there's like a ton of them. You can Google that, like I apologize for, or I should have taken responsibility for. But I see those as genuine I'm sorries. But in Spanish, like I said, there's 2. There's con permiso, which in English or in more of a technical translation means with permission. So it's kind of like saying, would you mind? So if, say, somebody's leaning against a locker and I need to get into the locker, I might go con permiso, or, do you mind if I get there because I've got business there and you don't. You would never say that, but it's implied. And so it's kind of not really, I'm sorry, could you move? But just, hey, I need to get there. Would you mind? The other phrase in Spanish is lo siento, which means more of the I'm sorry. So it's the genuine I'm sorry, right? Okay. So if you are, say, a little late for lunch, you can switch things up a little bit. Like maybe there was actually an accident on the road. Of course, with cell phones, we can text and stuff like that. But if for some reason you couldn't and you get there, instead of going, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. They had this thing, and that higher level of energy, it's almost, people aren't sure why that's there. If you said something like, hey, thanks for waiting, boop, all the energy is gone. There's not all that heightened level of anxiety. And people can really hear, thanks for waiting. Yeah, cool, that's fine. Let's go, let's eat. Somebody else with the, I'm sorry, I'm late. It begins, the other person could be taken aback because they're not really sure what's happening. So let's dig a little bit deeper and see if you can also apply this concepts to maybe saying I'm sorry at what I'll call a wrong time or a not great time, okay? So what do you think other people are thinking or feeling when you're saying the words, I'm sorry? Like, have you ever thought about how your words hit them? So if you say, oh, I'm sorry, and they don't respond, you might think they're not listening. they don't listen. Maybe they don't know how to respond to something that may be spoken in, I don't want, it's not inappropriate, but it's just not the best time to say, I'm sorry. Something better would be, thank you for waiting. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for being patient, rather than, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So, and there's other words to use besides thank you. So you just have to see, what is the situation? What can you use instead of I'm sorry when it's not a genuine apology? All right, let's see what else we have. So how to be present, or how do you present yourself, right? So when you're speaking, do you come from a place of feeling confident, or do you come from a place of, say, feeling less than? Because this may be a little hard to hear, but if you don't think you deserve to be heard, it's going to be really difficult to get other people to hear you when you don't even think you should be heard. And a lot of us have some of this I'm not important, I don't matter. And that's just not true. But if you're feeling it, it feels true to you. And I get that. So let's go through a little bit of this, and I'll give you some solutions on the back end. Okay. If you go to someone and you're speaking in a very quiet, timid, shy, shut down voice, I mean, maybe you're a true introvert and that's just how you are. But a lot of people come from a place of, I'm going to speak like that because if I don't, they're going to get mad at me. I'm going to create a conflict, and there's going to be all kinds of other problems. That's not exactly a good way to be able to get people to listen to you. It challenges them. They're like, why are they acting like that? And they're not thinking that consciously. It's a little bit of a taken back. Another is, how are you physically? Are you hunching your shoulders like, oh, I hope you can hear my words? And then that is a physical visual of how a person will look at somebody else and think, why am I listening to this person? You know, do you get nervous and stumble over your words? And I'm not sure, and I hope you listen. And what we're doing is trying to get the other person to help us feel better about how we're feeling inside. So the brain, especially the other brain, is designed to notice things. Our brain is designed to notice things. So we look out there to notice what's going on. And we've got to be very observant to others and whatever's in our environment to make sure what the brain needs is to be safe, right? So a million years ago in caveman times, everything was safe unless it wasn't, right? So the brain heard what's called the negative brain bias, a whole long thing. But it was like if something sounded off, it would grab our attention, right? And so even though we don't need that in the same way today, we have a tendency to still use those innate qualities, which they are great qualities to have inside ourselves. So if we show up in a I don't matter or I'm not important energy, you may again and again and again actually feel that feeling. See, there it is again. I don't matter. Wow, there it is again. I'm not important. So it's not so much that you're not. It's a way of coming from the inside out to present yourself. We're going to get to the thing in just a minute. So the part about seeing how you actually are, right? What is your confidence level? What do you sound like when you say something? What is your body like, right? So I know people will say, well, just act more confident or pretend you're important or fake it till you make it, that sort of thing. But that's actually a really hard thing to do if you don't know how, right? Because if you don't have that frame of reference from which to pull, you may never have ever been given the kind of training or skills or encouragement to go from there. So in other words, you might need to learn some very specific skills within yourself to help you elevate your own dignity, respect, and worth. When we were little, we were hoping to get it from our parents. We're out the house now. The only people we can count on to give it to us is ourselves. And that's kind of like a good thing because you can do it anytime you want. You don't have to wait for another person to give it to you. All right, so in just a moment, I'm going to tell you how you can make that happen. Get some of those skills for free. All right, so let's go over what we covered. And those are the 3 reasons. 1, different definitions, right? So maybe two different people have two different definitions for the same word or phrase or concept, right? So just like the word over can mean above and over can mean covering, make sure that both of you have the same definition. And you can say something like, hey, could you share what you're thinking about that? Because I may have a different idea, right? So you can ask questions of the other person. Number 2 is appropriate word use for the brain. So again, the brain prefers that active participation of having word like remember to get the bread versus don't forget to get the bread, because it's going to shut down. So you can have full responsibility of that and decide, I'm not going to use the words don't forget anymore. I'm going to use words like remember, or thank you for picking up, or thanking you in advance, or some other word or phrase that you feel comfortable with to help the other person's brain say, I want to remember this, right? Okay. Also, our brains want to interpret what we're hearing. So when someone goes, oh, I'm sorry at the wrong time. I'm sorry I dropped my pen. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Think about if somebody says to you, oh, I'm sorry I dropped my pen. Okay. Like, I don't know what to do with it. The body's like, the brain is confused. How do I process that? Like, okay, like there's nothing else to say. So when we can change that around and start saying things like, oops, drop my pen, we don't need to apologize for it, right? So we want to pay attention to how often we might say the words, I'm sorry, at times when it's more the low key, I don't want to call it frivolous, but the not necessary times. It's not this genuine apology where you're going to change your whole position on something, right? So if you do come in and you're late for, say, a lunch with a friend or a meeting or something, you can say, oh my gosh, thanks for waiting. If you're talking too much, instead of going, oh, I'm just rambling here, I'm so sorry, I'm rambling, you can say, thanks for listening. If you feel like you've been a little confused and like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm confusing, you can say, thanks for understanding, or thanks for hearing me out, right? So we can thank people instead of trying to apologize all the time, right? That was number 2. Number 3 is, how are we presenting ourselves? So if you're concerned or curious about how you might look when you are trying to have a conversation with somebody or get a point across, you may want to record yourself and then see what you look like. And then try one little thing that makes you feel better. You don't have to change your whole world, just one little thing. And then maybe you catch that on, and then one more little thing. So it's just these little bitty, teeny tiny steps that you may be able to take that will actually begin to help you improve your confidence level, how you speak, how you stand. So maybe you're deciding physically, instead of like this, I'm going to try to stand up a little bit more. And then another time, if you get that, then maybe you could stand up a little bit more. And then maybe you can relax your shoulders and just stand and tell it. So little steps can take you somewhere. All right. Now, let's get back to what I told you, where I told you you could learn more about how to get people to listen to you better for free. So if you've been struggling from any of these types of situations, you might benefit from my free resource center called the Self-Study Area. There's articles and downloads and ebooks, videos, quizzes, and all sorts of things. And not just on this subject, but on a whole variety of topics. And it will help you elevate your own dignity, respect, and worth in your time. What feels right for you? So just, if you want, type in DebbiePearson.com and click the light purple button. You'll see it. It says start here for free, and that will take you to the self-study area. You put your email in, and it will take you in. Okay? All right. See you next week. I'm Deb Pearson, helping you become more awesome on the inside.